All right, look at this create customer action. Here we're simply returning a customer DTO, which would eventually result in a response like this. So the status code of this response will be 200 or OK. And in the body, we'll have the customer object serialized as JSON. But in RESTful convention, when we create a resource, the status code should be 201 or created. So we need more control over the response returned from our action. And to make this happen, instead of returning customer DTO, we're going to return IHttpActionResult. This interface is similar to ActionResult we have in MVC framework. So it's implemented by a few different classes. And here in API controller, we have a bunch of helper methods to create an instance of one of the classes that implement this interface. Now here, if the model is not valid, instead of throwing an exception, we use the helper method bad request. So this bad request method returns a bad request result, which is a class that implements IHttpActionResult. Now at the end, instead of returning customer DTO, we call the created method. Here, as part of a RESTful convention, we need to return the URI of the newly created resource to the client. URI stands for Unified Resource Identifier. So if the ID of our new customer is 10, the URI to this resource would be something like this. So we create a new URI. This class is defined in the system namespace, so be sure to import it on the top. Now in the constructor, we need to get the URI of our current request, which would be something like this, and then append a slash and the ID of the newly created customer. To get the URI for the request, we use the request property of the controller and then request URI. Now append a slash and the ID of this customer. Now, as the second argument to the created method, we need to pass the actual object that was created, which would be customer DTO. Now, before testing this, let's go back to customer DTO. We need to temporarily comment out this attribute. Otherwise, we're going to get an exception. Let me explain why. So let's take a look at its implementation. Look here. We're casting this object instance to customer. But if this attribute is applied on one of the properties of customer DTO, we're going to get an exception here. Now, ideally, we should have only one way to create a customer. Currently, we have two different endpoints. One is an API endpoint we just created, and another one is the normal MVC action we created in the section about forms. So if you want to go with the API approach, we should drop that old MVC action and modify our form to post to our API endpoint. But that's beyond the scope of what we are doing now. So let's keep the application as is. We want to keep the customer form and instead go back to customer DTO and comment this out. Now build, back to the browser. In Postman history, I've got a request to post to our customers collection. So let's execute this again. All right, look. First of all, the status is changed from 200, which was OK, to 201, which is created. So this is confirming to RESTful convention. Also, if you look at the headers tab, you see a new key here, location, and look at the address. So that's the URI of the newly created customer. Again, this is part of the RESTful convention. So in web APIs, prefer to use IHttpActionResult as the return type of your actions. Now, let me show you one more example, and I will leave the rest as an exercise for you. Let's look at get customer action. So first we change the return type to IHttpActionResult. Now, if the customer is null, we return not found. Otherwise, we use OK helper method and put this DTO in this method. Pretty simple.